the weight of the world on her shoulders. The aroma of fresh coffee, sizzling bacon, and syrup-drenched pancakes filled the air of the Bluebell Diner. The place was bustling, as it always was on a Friday night, a melting pot of weary travelers, late-night workers, and regulars who had nowhere better to be. But for Sophia Calloway, the chaos of the diner wasn't just part of the job. It was her life. At 25, Sophia had already known more struggle than most people twice her age. She was the only daughter of a mother who had spent years battling chronic illness, and the weight of unpaid medical bills sat on Sophia's shoulders like a stone she could never put down. She had dreamed of a different life once, a college degree, a stable career, a cozy little home of her own. But those dreams had been left behind in hospital waiting rooms and late shifts that stretched into eternity. Tonight, the diner was packed. Sophia barely had time to breathe, let alone think about the bills waiting for her at home. She wove between tables, balancing plates stacked with greasy burgers and bowls of steaming clam chowder, her feet aching with every step. Table 5, extra pickles, no onions. Table 8 wants more coffee. The orders blurred together as she moved, her hands working on autopilot. Then the bell above the door jingled, signaling new customers. Sophia turned, adjusting her tired smile, and spotted a family of 4 hesitantly stepping inside. The father, a tall man in a worn-out button-up shirt, kept checking his phone as though waiting for bad news. The mother, her thin face framed by loose brown curls, clutched a small purse tightly against her chest. Their 2 children, a boy, no older than 10, and a little girl with a stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms, clung close to their parents. Sophia had seen this kind of family before. Not tourists, not regulars, just tired, anxious people searching for a moment of peace in the warmth of the diner. She approached with a practiced smile. Table for 4. The mother nodded hesitantly. Yes, please. As she led them to a booth in the corner, Sophia felt the tension rolling off them. The father sat with his back straight, his hands clenched together. The mother looked exhausted, but tried to muster a smile as she helped the little girl into the booth. Sophia handed them menus. Can I get you started with something to drink? The kids looked up eagerly, but the parents hesitated. The father cleared his throat. Just water for now. Thank you. Sophia nodded, but she had been working long enough to recognize when people were counting their pennies. A few minutes later, she returned with their waters and took their order. Just 1 burger to be split between the parents, a kid's meal for each of the children. The mother smiled apologetically. We're just keeping it light tonight. Sophia didn't push. She had been there before, sitting at home with a cup of ramen and pretending she wasn't still hungry. As the night dragged on, Sophia found herself stealing glances at the family. The parents spoke in hushed whispers, worry creasing their brows, while the kids quietly colored on their placemats with the free crayons the diner provided. When it was time to bring the check, she hesitated. Something in her gut told her that this wasn't going to go smoothly. The father pulled out a credit card with careful fingers, handing it to her with a hopeful smile. Sophia took it, her stomach twisting as she walked to the register. She slid the card into the machine. DC lined. Her heart sank. She tried again. DC lined. Her throat tightened as she glanced back at the family. The father was watching her, his face falling when he saw the hesitation in her eyes. Taking a breath, she walked back over, keeping her voice soft. I'm sorry, but your card was declined. The father swallowed hard, glancing at his wife, who had already gone pale. That can't be right, he muttered, reaching for his wallet. He pulled out another card and handed it to her, his fingers trembling. Sophia took it, offering a reassuring nod before turning back to the register. She swiped the second card. DC lined. She tried a third. DC lined. Her heart clenched. She turned back, prepared to break the news gently, but the mother had already buried her face in her hands. The father looked completely defeated, staring at the table as if willing the situation to change. The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Sophia's chest tightened. The mother wiped her eyes quickly and forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. Sophia could already see the wheels turning in the father's head. He was thinking of ways to apologize, ways to make up for this. Maybe he was considering leaving his watch or his wedding ring as collateral, promising to come back tomorrow. She had seen it before. She couldn't watch this happen. Before she could stop herself, she made a decision. "I've got it," she said. The father blinked. "What?" Sophia forced a small smile. "It's covered. Don't worry about it." The mother shook her head quickly. No, we can't let you." "It's okay," Sophia assured her. She hesitated, then added, "I've been in your shoes before." The father's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You don't have to do this." "I know," Sophia said softly, "but I want to." The mother started crying again, but this time it was different. She reached for Sophia's hand and squeezed it. "Thank you." Sophia nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. "Just pay it forward someday." As the family gathered their things, the little girl beamed up at her, holding out her stuffed rabbit. "Do you want to borrow Mr. Whiskers?" Sophia smiled and knelt down. "You keep him safe for me, okay?" The girl nodded solemnly before skipping out the door with her family. As they disappeared into the night, Sophia felt warmth bloom in her chest. She had lost a bit of money tonight, money she desperately needed, but somehow she felt lighter. But just as she turned back to finish her shift, a voice cut through the air like a whip. "Sophia." She turned sharply. Standing near the register, arms crossed, was Diane Monroe, the diner's manager. Her expression was unreadable. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Sophia's heart plummeted. And just like that, the weight of the world settled back onto her shoulders. The cost of kindness. Sophia's breath hitched in her throat as she faced Diane Monroe, the manager of the Bluebell Diner. The older woman's arms were crossed tightly, her brow furrowed with barely restrained irritation. Diane was a no-nonsense type, short-tempered, efficient, and known for running the diner like a well-oiled machine. She didn't tolerate slacking, excuses, or anything that might cut into the diner's bottom line. And now Sophia had just done something that might as well have been a cardinal sin in Diane's book. "I asked you a question," Diane said, her voice cold but controlled. "What did you just do?" Sophia straightened her posture, trying to mask the storm raging inside her. I covered their meal. Their cards were declined. They didn't have the money." Diane's expression didn't change. If anything, her lips pressed into an even thinner line. "And you thought that was your responsibility?" Sophia felt the eyes of a few lingering employees darting toward them. Tanya, the other night shift waitress and her closest friend, was peering from behind the soda fountain with obvious concern. Even Donna, the cashier who rarely looked up from the register, was watching with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Sophia swallowed hard. "I couldn't let them walk out of here humiliated, Diane. They had kids. They were struggling. She exhaled sharply. It was the right thing to do. Diane's eyes narrowed. "The right thing to do," she echoed, her voice laced with something almost dangerous. Sophia nodded, her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Yes." For a moment, there was silence. The faint hum of the old fluorescent lights overhead, the distant chatter of a few remaining customers, the muffled sound of rain pattering against the diner's front windows. Then Diane let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "Sophia, this isn't a charity. We're a business. Do you think we can afford to just let people eat for free whenever they feel like it?" "I don't expect you to understand," Sophia said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "But I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." Diane tilted her head slightly, studying her like she was some unfathomable puzzle. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the office. Sophia exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders loosen just slightly, until she heard Diane call out, Come to my office after your shift. We need to talk." A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Tanya rushed over the moment Diane disappeared. "What the hell was that?" she whispered, eyes wide. "I covered their bill," Sophia murmured. Tanya's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, girl." "I know," Sophia said, rubbing her temple. "But I couldn't just not help." Tanya let out a low whistle. "You might have just gotten yourself fired." Sophia winced. "Yeah. Was it worth it?" She hesitated for only a second before answering. "Yes." Tanya sighed but offered a small, proud smile. "Then let's hope Diane sees it that way. A mother's love and a daughter's struggles." Sophia's shift dragged on after that, each tick of the clock pulling her closer to whatever confrontation awaited in Diane's office. The usual rhythm of the night, refilling coffee, clearing plates, taking orders, felt heavier than usual. When the last customer finally left, and she wiped down her final table, she braced herself and walked to Diane's office, knocking hesitantly. "Come in," Diane's voice rang out. Sophia stepped inside. The office was cramped, a small desk overflowing with paperwork, a battered old filing cabinet, and the faint smell of stale coffee. Diane sat behind the desk, arms crossed. Sophia didn't even get a chance to sit before Diane spoke. "I should fire you." Sophia's stomach lurched. "You know I should," Diane continued, tapping her fingers against the desk. "But I won't." Sophia blinked, startled. "Wait, what?" Diane sighed, rubbing her temple. "Do you have any idea how many times I've seen waitresses come through this place, working their shifts, clocking out, and not giving a damn about the people sitting at these tables?" Sophia stayed silent. "But you do," Diane said, almost begrudgingly. "And that's rare." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Diane leaned forward. "But you also broke protocol. You don't own this place. You can't just decide who eats for free and who doesn't. If I let you do it, others might start expecting the same. Do you see the problem?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I do." Diane exhaled. "Look, I'm going to let it go this time. But don't ever pull that stunt again, or I won't hesitate next time." Relief flooded Sophia's chest. "I understand. Thank you." Diane nodded, already turning back to her paperwork. "Now get out of here. Your shift is over." Sophia didn't need to be told twice. She bolted out of the office, grabbing her jacket and stepping into the cold night air. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick, reflecting the glow of streetlights. She exhaled, shaking from the adrenaline still in her system. That had been too close. As she made her way to the bus stop, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a new text message. "Unknown number. This is Robert Johnson, the man from the diner tonight. I got your number from the receipt. I hope you don't mind. I just wanted to say thank you again. My wife and I will never forget what you did for us." Sophia smiled softly, warmth spreading through her chest. But then another text followed. "Robert Johnson, you have no idea how much that meal meant to us. And I promise, one day, we'll pay you back." Sophia didn't need them to pay her back. That wasn't why she had done it. But something told her that this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Not even close. The ripple effect of kindness. The night was crisp, the city lights flickering against the wet pavement as Sophia Calloway sat on the bus ride home, replaying the night's events in her head. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her phone, staring at the text from Robert Johnson, the man whose family she had helped at the diner. "You have no idea how much that meal meant to us. And I promise, one day, we'll pay you back." She exhaled slowly. She hadn't done it for payback. She had done it because she knew what it felt like to be desperate, to sit in front of an unpaid bill with nothing left but hopelessness. But now, after narrowly escaping Diane Monroe's wrath at work, she was exhausted. The bus came to a screeching halt at her stop, and she trudged through the cold air toward her small one-bedroom apartment. The neighborhood was quiet. the kind of place that felt safe enough during the day, but had an eerie stillness at night. She climbed the narrow staircase, fumbled with her keys, and pushed open the door to her tiny sanctuary. The apartment was modest at best: a thrift store couch, a rickety coffee table, and a kitchen barely big enough for one person. But it was home. The only light in the room came from a single framed photo on the bookshelf, the last picture of her and her mother before her health started to decline. Her mother. Sophia's chest tightened as she pulled out her phone and checked her messages. Nothing from the assisted living facility yet. That was a good sign. No news usually meant that things were stable. She plopped onto the couch, letting her head rest against the back, and stared at the ceiling. Everything in her life was a delicate balance. One unexpected expense could tip it all over. Rent, medical bills, groceries, her own dreams, if they even still existed, were buried beneath all of that. And yet, she had no regrets about what she did for the Johnson family. She just wished kindness didn't have such a steep price. The unexpected gift. The next morning, Sophia's alarm blared at 5:00 a.m., dragging her from the little sleep she had managed. Her shift at the diner started early on Saturdays, and though she craved sleep, she needed the paycheck more. She went through the motions: shower, coffee, a quick slice of toast, and grabbed her bag before heading out the door. As she stepped outside, she nearly tripped over something sitting at her doorstep: a small white envelope. Sophia frowned and bent down, picking it up. There was no name, no return address, just her first name scrawled in neat handwriting. She hesitated before carefully tearing it open. Inside was a stack of crisp $100 bills. Her breath caught in her throat as she unfolded the small note that accompanied them. "Sophia, this is not charity. This is gratitude. You changed our night when we had no hope left. Now let us do the same for you. Pay it forward when you can." There was no signature. Sophia's hands shook. She quickly counted. $500. Her rent, her groceries, maybe even something for her mother's medical needs. For a moment, her heart soared. This money would keep her afloat, if only for a little while. But then, who had left it? Her mind immediately went to Robert and Patricia Johnson. Could they really have pulled together this much money overnight? And if not them, then who? Shadows of doubt. She walked into the Bluebell Diner, with the envelope still in her purse, her mind racing with possibilities. As soon as she stepped behind the counter, Tanya raised an eyebrow. "You look like you saw a ghost." Sophia hesitated before pulling Tanya aside and whispering, "I found this outside my apartment this morning." She showed her the note and the bills. Tanya's eyes widened. "Wait. What? Somebody just dropped $500 at your door?" Sophia nodded. "Girl, that's either an angel or a trap." Sophia sighed. "I don't know who it's from." "Are you sure it's not the Johnson family?" Sophia hesitated. "I don't know. I don't want to text them and make them feel like they owe me something." Tanya gave her a pointed look. "And what if it's someone else? What if this is, I don't know, some creep trying to get your attention?" A chill ran down Sophia's spine. She hadn't thought of that. The idea of an anonymous gift was one thing, but an unknown motive, that was something else entirely. Tanya leaned against the counter, deep in thought. "Well, you could do nothing and just use the money." Sophia shook her head. "That doesn't feel right." Tanya smirked. "Of course, it doesn't. You've got the moral compass of a nun." Sophia let out a breathy laugh. "Not true." Tanya crossed her arms. "So what's the plan? Keep the money? Give it away? Hunt down your mystery donor?" Sophia wasn't sure, but she had a feeling she was about to find out. A millionaire walks into a diner. The lunch rush had just started to die down when the diner's front door swung open. Sophia looked up automatically, expecting another regular or maybe a new customer looking for a quiet meal. Instead, a man in a dark navy suit stepped inside, looking entirely out of place in their cozy little diner. He was tall, with neatly combed hair that was just starting to gray at the temples. His posture was confident, his movements measured, like someone who was used to being in control. He surveyed the room briefly before locking eyes with Sophia. Her stomach flipped. Who was he? And why was he looking at her like he already knew her? She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and approached, forcing a polite smile. "Welcome to the Bluebell Diner. Would you like a booth or a seat at the counter?" The man smiled, his expression warm yet unreadable. "A booth, please. But I was actually hoping to speak with someone." Sophia felt a strange sense of déjà vu. "Oh," she asked carefully. "Who?" His gaze didn't waver. "Sophia Calloway." Her breath hitched. "I'm Sophia," she said, masking her sudden nervousness. "How can I help you?" The man extended a hand. "David Sterling." That name didn't ring any bells. "I wanted to meet the woman everyone's been talking about." Sophia blinked. "Talking about?" David chuckled lightly, sliding into the booth. "Let's just say, your act of kindness didn't go unnoticed." Something about the way he said it sent a thrill of unease through Sophia's spine. She swallowed. "And what exactly do you want from me, Mr. Sterling?" His smile didn't fade. "To change your life. A stranger's offer and the price of opportunity." The diner suddenly felt too small. Sophia Calloway had seen her fair share of customers, some wealthy, some struggling, some just passing through. But David Sterling was unlike anyone who had ever walked through the doors of the Bluebell Diner. There was something about the way he carried himself, calm, composed, unreadable, that made her skin prickle. He wasn't just here for coffee. And the way he had said it, "I wanted to meet the woman everyone's been talking about." Her stomach tightened. She folded her arms, taking a careful step back from the booth. "I'm sorry, but I don't really know what you mean." David Sterling only smiled, patient and unbothered, like he had expected her reaction. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Why don't you sit for a moment?" Sophia hesitated. Everything inside her screamed not to. But curiosity, that ever-dangerous thing, won. With a cautious glance toward Tanya, who was blatantly eavesdropping from the counter, Sophia slid into the booth across from him. She folded her hands in her lap, forcing a polite smile. "All right, what's this about?" David set his hands on the table, fingers laced together. "It's about the story." Sophia blinked. "What story?" He arched a brow. "Yours." For a second, her mind blanked. Then realization struck like a match. The Johnson family, the viral Facebook post, the people who had commented, the ones who had called the diner, trying to find out who she was. Had this stranger seen that? "I read about what you did," David continued, tilting his head slightly. "You paid for a family's meal when they were in trouble, knowing it could cost you your job. You chose kindness over self-preservation." Sophia exhaled sharply. "It wasn't that dramatic." David chuckled. "Maybe not. But acts like that, they don't happen as often as they should." She didn't know what to say to that. David leaned back, studying her. "Tell me something, Sophia. Why are you still working here?" Sophia stiffened. There was no judgment in his voice, but something about the question made her defensive. "Because I need to." David nodded. "And if you had another choice?" She frowned. "I don't." A flicker of something, satisfaction, crossed his face. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. He set it down on the table between them. "Maybe you do now." Sophia stared at it like it might bite her. Sterling Enterprises. David Sterling, founder and CEO. Her fingers hovered over the card before she picked it up hesitantly. The weight of the cardstock was too luxurious, too real. "I don't understand," she said finally. "What exactly do you do?" David folded his hands again. "I invest in people." She narrowed her eyes. "That sounds vague." He smirked. "It does, doesn't it?" She let out a short breath, rubbing her forehead. "Okay, look, I appreciate whatever this is, but if you're about to offer me a job, I should warn you, I have no fancy degrees, no corporate experience, just a resume full of waitressing jobs and a life spent trying to survive. David's smirk faded into something softer. Exactly. She frowned. I'm not looking for degrees, Sophia, he continued. I'm looking for people like you. People who know struggle, who know what it's like to fight for every step, who have more determination than resources. She swallowed hard. Why? Because those are the people who make the best leaders. Sophia's heart skipped. David leaned in slightly. Tell me, if you weren't stuck here, what would you be doing? The answer came too quickly. Culinary school. But the thought felt too personal, too impossible, so she swallowed it back down and shrugged. I don't know. David didn't believe her. She could see it in his knowing expression. You don't have to decide right now, he said smoothly. But my company runs a program, an investment initiative. I help people transition out of survival mode and into something better. Sophia stared at him. You just give people money. David chuckled. No, I give them opportunity, training, education, mentorship. A way out. Her throat went dry. A way out. She had spent so long trapped in this cycle, worrying about rent, her mother's bills, the next shift, the next crisis, that the idea of escape felt like a fairy tale. But fairy tales weren't real. She sat back, crossing her arms. And what's the catch? David didn't flinch. No catch. Just an expectation. You work for it. You put in the effort. And I provide the resources. It sounded too good to be true. Sophia's mind screamed at her to be careful. Nobody just gives opportunities away. And yet, something in David's voice, something in his calm certainty. She felt a spark. I don't know, she said honestly. I need time to think. David nodded. Take your time. But don't take too long. He slid out of the booth, standing to leave. Before he walked away, he paused and looked at her one last time. The world doesn't wait forever, Sophia. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with a business card, a stomach full of nerves, and a terrifying question. What if he was right? The weight of a decision. The rest of Sophia's shift passed in a haze. She barely registered Tanya waving a hand in front of her face. Earth to Sophia. Sophia blinked. What? Tanya smirked. Are you going to tell me who Mr. Fancy Suit was, or do I have to start coming up with my own theories? Sophia hesitated before pulling out the business card and sliding it across the counter. Tanya picked it up, eyes widening. David Sterling. As indeed David Sterling. Sophia frowned. You know him. Girl, Tanya breathed. Everybody knows him. He's some self-made millionaire, owns half of Hartford, runs a mentorship program that people would sell their kidneys to get into. Sophia's pulse jumped. Tanya set the card down, staring at her like she had just won the lottery. And he came here. To see you. Sophia exhaled shakily. I don't know if I can trust this. Tanya's lips curled into a slow grin. Then let me ask you something. Sophia waited. Tanya leaned in. If you weren't scared, would you do it? The words hit too deep, too fast. Sophia's mouth went dry. Because she already knew the answer. Standing at the crossroads, the rest of the day at the Bluebell Diner was a blur. Orders came in. Orders went out. Plates clattered. The coffee machine sputtered. Customers left. New ones came. But Sophia, she was stuck somewhere in between, lost in a haze of uncertainty. David Sterling's business card sat in the pocket of her apron, pressing against her like a ticking time bomb. Her shift ended just after 5 p.m. By the time she stepped outside, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet. Tanya practically chased her out the door, her voice sharp with excitement. Okay, are we gonna talk about the fact that a freaking millionaire just offered you the golden ticket out of here? Sophia sighed, rubbing her temples. It's not that simple. Tanya crossed her arms. What's so complicated? He's giving you a chance to leave this dump and actually make something of yourself. And what? You're just gonna pretend like that didn't happen." Sophia stopped walking. She turned to face Tanya, frustration bubbling to the surface. "This dump is how I pay my rent, Tanya. It's how I keep my mom's medical bills from piling up. It's how I—" She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. Tanya's face softened. "I know, Soph. I do. But don't you get it? That's the problem." Sophia stared at her. Tanya took a step closer. "You're always just getting by. Surviving. But this—" She gestured toward Sophia's pocket, where the business card still sat. "This could be your chance to actually live." Sophia's stomach twisted. She hated that Tanya was right. Because deep down, Sophia knew. She had spent so much of her life reacting to the next crisis that she had forgotten what it felt like to dream about anything beyond just making it to the next paycheck. And now, for the first time in years, she had a choice. A mother's advice. That night, Sophia took the bus to Street Augustine's assisted living, the quiet facility where her mother, Karen Calloway, had been living for the past few months. The place was clean but simple, filled with elderly residents who had nowhere else to go. Her mother's condition had worsened over the past year. Her lungs had grown weaker, and even basic tasks like walking across the room left her winded. But her spirit, unshaken. When Sophia stepped into room 207, her mother looked up from her book, her tired blue eyes lighting up. "There's my girl." Sophia smiled and kissed her forehead. "Hey, Mom." Karen gestured to the old armchair beside her bed. "Come sit. Tell me about your day." Sophia hesitated. And then, for some reason, she told her everything. The Johnson family. The Facebook post going viral. The mysterious envelope of money. And finally, David Sterling's offer. When she finished, her mother sat in thoughtful silence for a long moment. Finally, she reached over and took Sophia's hands in her own, her grip still as strong as ever. "Sophia," she said softly, "I love you, but you are the most stubborn person I've ever met." Sophia blinked. "What?" Karen shook her head, smiling. "You act like you don't want this, but I can see it in your face. You do." Sophia's throat tightened. Her mother squeezed her hands. "Sweetheart, you've spent your whole life taking care of me, and I will never stop being grateful for that. But you can't put your entire future on hold because of me." Sophia felt a lump rise in her throat. "Mom, Karen's gaze was gentle but firm. "If you don't take this chance, if you don't at least try, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Sophia inhaled sharply. Because the truth was, she was terrified. Of failing. Of getting her hopes up, only to watch them crash down again. But more than anything, she was terrified of proving herself right. That she was meant to be stuck in this cycle forever. That she wasn't the kind of person who got opportunities like this. Her mother must have seen the hesitation in her face, because she squeezed her hand tighter. "Take the chance, baby," Karen whispered. "You've earned it." The call that changed everything. Sophia sat in her apartment that night, staring at David Sterling's business card, like it was a loaded gun. The weight of it in her palm felt too real. The clock on her wall ticked loudly. Each second felt like a countdown to a decision she wasn't sure she was ready to make. Then, before she could change her mind, she grabbed her phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before a voice picked up. David Sterling. Sophia swallowed hard. "It's Sophia." There was a pause. Then, a smile in his voice. "I was hoping you'd call." Sophia gripped the phone tighter. She hesitated. "I don't know what I'm doing." David chuckled. "That's okay. Nobody does at first." A beat of silence. Then, finally, the words she never thought she'd say. "I want to hear more about the program." David's voice was warm. "Good. Let's talk." And just like that, everything changed. A leap of faith. The silence after Sophia Calloway's words felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. I want to hear more about the program." She couldn't believe she had actually said it. The moment the words left her lips, it felt as if she had stepped off a ledge, free falling toward something unknown. And yet, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just standing still. On the other end of the line, David Sterling's voice was calm, steady. "Good," he said. "Let's talk." Sophia exhaled, gripping her phone tighter. "Okay, how does this work?" David chuckled. "Not over the phone, for one. Meet me tomorrow, 11 a.m. Sterling Enterprises, downtown Hartford." Sophia blinked. Downtown? That fancy office building? The very one. A flicker of doubt crept in. "I don't even know what I'd be agreeing to." "You're not agreeing to anything yet," David said smoothly. "You're just listening. Then you decide." Sophia chewed her lip. It still felt unreal. Like any second now, she would wake up and realize that she was still the struggling waitress at the Bluebell Diner, still trapped in the same cycle she had been in for years. But then she thought of her mother's words. "Take the chance, baby. You've earned it." She squared her shoulders. "All right, I'll be there." "Good." David's voice held a note of approval. "See you tomorrow, Sophia." The line clicked dead. Sophia set her phone down, staring at it like it might explode. What had she just done? A different kind of morning. The next morning felt different. Instead of throwing on her usual diner uniform, she stood in front of her small closet, frowning. What do people wear to meetings with millionaires? Everything she owned screamed working class, worn in, and cheap. She settled on her best thrift store blouse, a pair of simple black slacks, and a pair of clean but well-loved flats. She pulled her hair into a neat ponytail, touched up her face with the last bit of drugstore foundation she owned, and hoped for the best. By the time she arrived outside Sterling Enterprises, her stomach was in knots. The building was glass and steel, sleek and modern, standing tall against the Hartford skyline. People in tailored suits and designer heels walked in and out, carrying coffee cups that probably cost more than her entire breakfast. She felt like a fraud just standing there. But she had made it this far. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders, stepped forward, and pushed open the doors. Sterling Enterprises. The inside was even more intimidating than the outside. Polished floors, a massive chandelier, walls of glass revealing panoramic views of the city. Everything smelled like wealth. The receptionist at the front desk barely looked up as she typed away. "Name? Sophia Calloway. I have a meeting with David Sterling." That got her attention. The receptionist's brows lifted slightly before she nodded and gestured toward the elevator. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you. 15th floor." Sophia murmured a thank you before stepping inside the gleaming elevator. As the doors slid shut, she stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls. She didn't belong here. Not yet. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. She stepped out into a sprawling office space, filled with more glass walls, modern furniture, and an incredible view of the Hartford skyline. And there, waiting for her, was David Sterling. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than a year's worth of her rent. When he turned, his expression was calm but assessing. "Right on time," he said. Sophia forced a breath. "I figured you were the kind of guy who appreciates punctuality." David smirked. "Smart." He gestured toward a seating area. "Come. Sit." Sophia hesitated, then walked over, her every step measured. She lowered herself onto the plush leather chair, feeling painfully out of place. David sat across from her, studying her like a man who had already made his decision. "I'm going to get straight to the point," he said. "I want to offer you an opportunity. Not a handout. Not charity. A way out." Sophia tensed. "A way out of what?" David leaned forward slightly. "The cycle you're in. The one that keeps you running in circles, barely making enough to survive, sacrificing every dream you've ever had just to keep your head above water." Her stomach twisted, because he wasn't wrong. David continued, his voice measured. I run an initiative, Sterling Enterprises' Second Chance program. I take people with drive, talent, and work ethic, and I invest in them. Training, education, career placement. I help them move forward. And I think you, Sophia, are exactly the kind of person who would thrive in it. Sophia stared at him. Why me? David smirked. Because I see something in you, and because I know what it's like to grow up with nothing. That surprised her. You? David nodded. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. We barely had enough to get by. I worked my way up, from a busboy to a CEO. Sophia's breath hitched. He shrugged. So when I see people like you, people who are willing to fight for a better life, I take a chance on them, just like someone once took a chance on me. Sophia swallowed hard. It was too much, too real, too fast. She needed time to think. David must have sensed her hesitation because he leaned back, his voice even. You don't have to decide today. Relief flooded her. But he added, his tone firm, if you do this, you have to commit. No half measures, no safety nets. You take the leap, and you don't look back. Sophia's heart pounded. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something massive. A chance like this didn't come twice. But taking it? That meant leaving behind everything she had ever known. The diner. The only stability she had. The life she had built. Could she really do that? Or was she too afraid to try? David's voice cut through her swirling thoughts. The world won't wait forever, Sophia. And deep down she knew. Neither could she. The price of change. The words lingered in the air like an invisible weight. The world won't wait forever, Sophia. David Sterling's voice was steady, unwavering, but it carried an undeniable urgency, one that made Sophia's heart pound in her chest. She stared down at the business card he had placed on the sleek glass table between them. It felt heavier than it should, as if the weight of her entire future was resting in that small rectangular piece of cardstock. Her hands were clenched into fists in her lap. Her mind was at war with itself. Everything in her life had been a fight, to pay rent, to keep food on the table, to afford her mother's medical bills. She had spent years believing that this was just how life was meant to be for people like her. And now, a man like David Sterling, a man who had everything, was offering her a way out. A chance to rewrite her story. But could she really take it? Could she risk everything she had ever known for the unknown? She took a shaky breath and finally found her voice. Mr. Sterling, she said carefully, I appreciate this, more than I can even explain. But I need time. David's expression remained unreadable. To think. Sophia hesitated, then nodded. A flicker of something, disappointment, crossed his face, but it was gone before she could be sure. I understand, he said, leaning back in his chair. But like I said, this opportunity won't be here forever. She swallowed. How much time do I have? David tapped his fingers against the armrest. A week. Her stomach twisted. 1 week. 1 week to decide whether to take the biggest risk of her life. 1 week to decide if she was brave enough to leave everything behind. She nodded. Okay. David studied her for a moment before offering his hand. Whatever you decide, I hope you make the right choice for yourself. Sophia hesitated for only a second before shaking his hand. His grip was firm, confident. Hers was trembling. A familiar place, a different feeling. The Bluebell diner felt smaller when she walked back in later that evening. She had spent years under these flickering lights, serving coffee, wiping tables, rushing orders to customers who barely acknowledged her. This place had been her whole world. But for the first time, she realized, it wasn't her future. She barely made it to the back before Tanya ambushed her. Oh my God. Sophia jumped as her best friend grabbed her shoulders and shook her like a rag doll. You had a meeting with a millionaire, and I had to find out from the group chat. Are you kidding me? Sophia let out a breathless laugh, pushing Tanya off her. I didn't exactly have time to debrief you. Tanya's eyes were practically glowing with excitement. Tell me everything. Sophia sighed, sitting down at the break room table. He offered me a spot in his program. Tanya's jaw dropped. You mean the program? Sophia nodded. Tanya let out an actual scream before slamming her hands on the table. What the hell are you still doing here? Say yes. Sophia's stomach twisted. I don't know if I can. Tanya froze. Wait. What? Sophia ran a hand through her hair, frustrated. Tanya, if I leave, what happens to my mom? What if this doesn't work out? What if I fail? Tanya's expression softened. She sat down across from Sophia, grabbing her hands. Soph, babe, listen to me. Sophia met her gaze. You have spent your entire life putting everyone else first. Your mom, this job, your responsibilities. You have never, not even once, done something for you. Sophia opened her mouth, but Tanya cut her off. I get it. You're scared. But this isn't about whether you fail or not. It's about whether you finally take a chance on yourself. Sophia felt her chest tighten. She had spent so many years making the safe choices, but safe had kept her stuck. Tanya squeezed her hands. I know it's terrifying, but you deserve more than this diner, Sophia. And you know it. Sophia's throat tightened. Did she? Could she really be something more? A mother's final push. The next morning, Sophia walked into Street Augustine's assisted living with a weight in her chest. Her mother was sitting by the window, wrapped in her favorite knitted blanket, watching the autumn leaves fall outside. She turned when she saw Sophia and smiled softly. Hey, baby. Sophia forced a smile, walking over and sitting beside her. Her mother studied her. Something's on your mind. Sophia swallowed hard. I need your advice. Karen's lips twitched. I was hoping you'd say that. Sophia frowned. You knew. Her mother chuckled. Tanya called me. Sophia groaned. Of course she did. Karen took her daughter's hands in her frail ones. Tell me what you're thinking. Sophia hesitated before pouring everything out. Her fear, her doubt, the guilt she felt about leaving her mother behind. Karen listened, never interrupting. When Sophia finally finished, her mother sighed. Sophia met her gaze. Go. Sophia's breath hitched. But. Karen shook her head. No buts. You have given up enough for me. Now it's time to live your life. Sophia's throat burned. Mom, I'm scared. Karen smiled softly. That means you're doing something worth doing. A lump formed in Sophia's throat. Her mother reached out, gently tucking the stray hair behind her ear. Baby, if you don't take this chance, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And I can't let that happen. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. But what if I fail? Karen's eyes shone with love. Then you get back up. Sophia's hands trembled. Then finally, she nodded. She had made her decision. The call that changed everything. That evening, as the sun set over Hartford, Sophia picked up her phone and dialed the number. It rang once, twice. Then, David Sterling. Sophia took a deep breath. I'm in. A pause. Then, a smile in his voice. Good choice. And just like that, her life changed forever.